Have you ever wondered what could happen if humans were pushed beyond the limits of sleep, consciousness, and control? In 1955, deep inside a classified U.S. military facility, a secret experiment was underway, known only as Project Omega. The aim seemed simple on paper: study the effects of prolonged sleep on the human brain and test chemical compounds that might enhance learning or obedience during unconscious states. But as with many secret military experiments, the reality was far darker. Volunteers were selected from military personnel and individuals labeled as disposable by the government: prisoners, psychiatric patients, and orphaned young adults. Once chosen, they were placed into specialized chambers where they were kept asleep for days, even weeks at a time, under constant observation. Special IVs delivered experimental chemicals intended to enhance brain receptivity. During these long sleep cycles, at first the subjects appeared to adapt. Brain waves were monitored, vitals recorded, and the scientists noted slight changes in neural activity. But then the unexpected began. Some subjects stopped responding normally. Their eyes would open, but only partially. They would respond to commands automatically, yet could not speak, move voluntarily, or even recognize people around them. Witnesses described scenes straight out of a nightmare. A man would slowly rise from his bed, walk the length of the lab, and carry out tasks exactly as instructed, without blinking, without hesitation, almost as if his body were alive, but his mind dead. One technician later recalled a subject attempting to bite a nurse, yet his eyes remained vacant, completely devoid of human awareness. Weeks passed, and more incidents occurred. Some subjects began showing aggressive behavior, lashing out at anyone nearby. Chemical interactions had unexpected effects. The longer the subject remained under the influence, the more automatic their actions became, and the more violent. Restraints were sometimes necessary. In a few cases, researchers were bitten, scratched, or knocked unconscious. When Project Omega was finally exposed to internal review, the government quickly swept incidents under the rug. Officially, the program ended due to safety concerns and lack of useful results. But former employees whispered in private about what they had seen. Humans trapped in a limbo between life and death, obedient yet dangerous. Fully alive but stripped of consciousness. Living puppets manipulated by chemical compounds and extended sleep. Some believe that Project Omega inspired later myths of zombies in American culture, not the mindless flesh eaters of films, but humans whose will has been completely erased, leaving only obedience and aggression behind. Today, the exact location and details of Project Omega remain classified. Documents were destroyed, witnesses silenced, and the public never learned the truth. But those who survived remember it vividly. The empty eyes, the mechanical obedience, and the terrifying realization that science can strip away everything that makes us human. What if experiments like Project Omega weren't just historical curiosities? What if somewhere, deep underground, similar projects continue, hidden from public knowledge, waiting for the day they are unleashed? The line between science and nightmare is thinner than we think, and Project Omega proves just how far humanity can go when fear, control, and ambition collide. Have you ever heard of people being turned into living puppets by mysterious powders and secret rituals? In Haiti, legends of the zombie curse are more than folklore. They are based on real, terrifying experiments that blur the line between science, magic, and horror. The story begins in the 1940s, when anthropologists and ethnobotanists started documenting local practices involving zombie powders. These were not fictional concoctions, but real mixtures derived from rare plants, toxins, and sometimes even animal venoms. The aim, as described by practitioners, was horrifyingly simple: to paralyze the body, erase free will, and make the victim completely obedient. One famous account comes from Wade Davis, an ethnobotanist who investigated these powders in rural Haiti. He described victims who were seemingly dead, buried, sometimes for days, only to return later as hollow-eyed, submissive workers controlled by the people who had poisoned them. These were living, breathing individuals, but their personalities and memories had been wiped away. The process was methodical. Victims were first dosed with a cocktail of toxic ingredients. Tetrodotoxin, a poison derived from pufferfish, was often the main agent. It induced paralysis, slowed breathing, and temporarily mimicked death. The person would be buried or hidden for hours or even days while the toxin worked its sinister magic. When the victim awoke, the transformation was terrifying. They were conscious but unable to think independently, completely controlled by the one who administered the powder. Their eyes were blank, their movements robotic, and their voices subdued. Some victims were reported to work for months without question, performing tasks for their captors as if they had no soul of their own. Witnesses in Haitian villages tell chilling stories. A woman was supposedly buried alive after a dispute with her family and returned weeks later, serving the man who poisoned her as if she owed him her life. Another man, a young laborer, vanished for days, only to return with vacant eyes and unresponsive behavior, working endlessly in the fields with no memory of his former life. While some argue that these are merely myths or exaggerated tales, scientific studies have suggested a terrifying reality. Tetrodotoxin is potent enough to mimic death. When combined with other plant-derived hallucinogens, it can create a state of psychological submission. Essentially, these zombie powders were early examples of humans being chemically manipulated, stripped of free will, and turned into obedient, living shadows of themselves. But the horror didn't stop at paralyzing the body. Some victims developed aggressive tendencies after prolonged exposure. When confronted or defiant, they would lash out unpredictably. This created a scenario similar to what you might imagine as a zombie outbreak. Humans appearing alive, moving in strange automatic ways, and sometimes attacking anyone in their path. Researchers who studied the phenomenon were often threatened or dismissed. Locals would rarely talk openly, fearing reprisals or social ostracization. Yet over decades, whispers and accounts persisted, painting a consistent picture, somewhere between folklore and reality. Human beings had been chemically enslaved, living in a limbo between life and death. The Haitian zombie phenomenon even caught the attention of Western scientists and media. Articles from the 1960s documented people returning from death to work in fields or serve others, always with blank expressions and no sense of self. Anthropologists recorded ritualistic practices where powders were administered with chants and ceremonial intent, suggesting that the psychological control was reinforced by fear and belief as much as by toxins. These stories have inspired countless movies, books, and horror legends, from the classic zombie films to modern depictions of mindless, obedient hordes. Yet, unlike Hollywood fiction, this was grounded in real human suffering, experimentation, and chemical manipulation. The line between folklore and experiment is blurred, making it all the more unsettling. Today, the secret of Haitian zombie powders remains partially shrouded. Some powders and methods have been lost over time, while others continue to be passed down in secrecy. Modern science can explain the chemistry, but not the full horror of what it did to the human mind and soul. Imagine being trapped in your own body, forced to obey, aware of nothing, unable to fight back. A living nightmare that no movie can truly capture. The question is chilling. Could similar experiments happen today? Could modern chemistry, combined with psychological manipulation, recreate these living puppets anywhere in the world? Haiti's secret serums remind us that reality can be far darker than fiction, that sometimes the legends we laugh at or fear in stories are rooted in true human horrors. So the next time you hear about zombies, remember, some of the most terrifying zombies weren't born on the silver screen. They were created in secret labs and remote villages through toxins, rituals, and sheer human cruelty. And the thought that such experiments might still exist somewhere is enough to send shivers down your spine. What if one of America's most secret laboratories almost became the site of a real-life zombie outbreak? In 1969, Fort Detrick, Maryland, a facility known for its biological research, became the center of a terrifying incident that has been hidden from the public for decades. Fort Detrick was the heart of the U.S. biological weapons program. Scientists there worked with deadly pathogens, testing ways to incapacitate enemies without conventional warfare. Official documents detail experiments with viruses, toxins, and neurological agents. But behind closed doors, whispers suggest something far more disturbing was being attempted. A virus designed to manipulate human behavior. Stripping away reason and inducing uncontrolled aggression, the outbreak began quietly, according to leaked testimonies from former staff. An experimental virus, classified at the time as a neurological pathogen, accidentally escaped containment. Laboratory protocols failed. Few researchers were exposed before safety measures could isolate them. What happened next terrified everyone involved. Those infected did not simply fall ill. Instead, they exhibited aggressive, erratic behavior, attacking colleagues and showing signs of extreme agitation. Eyewitnesses described staff members moving with mechanical precision, yet their eyes were blank and unresponsive, almost as if their consciousness had been stripped away. Some were capable of speech but would only repeat commands or phrases spoken by others. Others attempted to bite or claw at anyone nearby. The facility descended into chaos. Security teams were called in, but standard restraints and sedation were often ineffective. Some infected personnel reportedly had to be shot to prevent further attacks. Yet according to whispers, a few victims continued to twitch and move long after death, requiring complete incineration to prevent contamination. This was not a virus that killed quickly. It transformed behavior first, then life itself became secondary. Neighbors near Fort Detrick recall strange nights. Military trucks blocked roads, smoke rose from incinerators, and unusual alarms blared late at night. Local residents were told nothing except that a lab accident had occurred. Some reports even claimed that bodies were transported in sealed containers, bypassing standard procedures. Fueling rumors of a cover-up, declassified files confirmed that accidents did occur, but the scale and nature were heavily censored. References to containment breaches and staff exposure exist, yet nothing mentions the behavioral effects, attacks, or violence described by former insiders. The truth was likely deemed too sensitive to release. The psychological impact on surviving staff was profound. Many were deeply traumatized, refusing to speak publicly for decades. Some described sleepless nights haunted by visions of colleagues acting violently, eyes vacant, bodies twitching. Others reported being forced to inject sedatives into thrashing, fully conscious but uncontrollable coworkers. The line between life and death seemed to blur inside those walls. Interestingly, the Fort Detrick incident inspired later government studies into behavior-altering pathogens. While publicly labeled medical research internally, some scientists believed such viruses could create obedient soldiers or incapacitate enemy populations. The horror was not just accidental. It was the potential weaponization of human behavior itself. The incident faded from public awareness, buried under layers of classification. Files were sealed or destroyed, and surviving witnesses were sworn to silence. Yet in whispered accounts, Fort Detrick became synonymous with what some call America's closest brush with a real zombie outbreak. Unlike fiction, this was human experimentation gone horribly wrong. Rooted in Cold War paranoia and the pursuit of absolute control, modern researchers who have studied the case emphasize a chilling reality. The virus in question was designed to alter neural function, not just induce fever or illness. In other words, it didn't simply kill. It reprogrammed behavior, sometimes violently. Victims remained alive, but their free will, their identity, and their ability to reason were stripped away. In some accounts, this lasted hours, in others, days or longer. The incident also demonstrates how fragile containment can be. Single lapse, a spilled vial, a door left ajar. A minor protocol error can unleash consequences far beyond what any protocol predicts. For the staff at Fort Detrick, one small mistake almost meant a catastrophe the public would never forget. If it had leaked, to this day, Fort Detrick remains a center for biological research, now under strict safety protocols. But the shadow of 1969 lingers. Its documents, whispers, and testimonies hint that experiments pushing the boundaries of human behavior have never truly ceased. And while modern science may be safer, the haunting question remains: could the living puppet scenarios of the past be recreated in the present? With modern technology and viruses more potent than ever? Imagine walking the halls of a top-secret lab at night, hearing muffled screams, doors slamming, and the sound of frantic footsteps. You look through a window and see figures moving unnaturally, eyes blank, bodies tense, responding only to orders or impulses. You realize these are humans alive, yet stripped of their humanity. A terrifying reminder that the horrors we imagine in movies may sometimes exist in reality. The Fort Detrick outbreak is a chilling lesson in science, secrecy, and the thin line between innovation and nightmare. It is a story few will ever hear, but one that reminds us that the darkest experiments are often the ones hidden from view. And the final thought is perhaps the most frightening. If it could happen once, what's to say it couldn't happen again, somewhere under far stricter secrecy, with consequences no one could stop? These were three of the most chilling real-life experiments that pushed the boundaries of science and humanity. From Project Omega's sleep control horrors, to the zombie powders of Haiti, and the terrifying Fort Detrick outbreak, each story shows how close humanity has come to creating its own monsters. The line between science and nightmare is thinner than we ever imagined. Some experiments were hidden, some covered up, but their echoes remain in history and in our darkest fears. If you want to uncover more true horror stories, secret experiments, and terrifying real-life accounts, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell. Every day brings new stories that will haunt you long after the screen goes dark.